Good evening, viewers. You're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Chourdhry. 11 men, convicts of Bilkis Bano's gang rape and killing of 7 of her family members in the aftermath of 2002 Godhra riots. The barbarians of Bilkis Bano serving life imprisonment. They were prematurely freed on the day India was celebrating 75 years of its independence. There was jubilation celebrations at the Vishwa Hindu Parishad's Godhra office on the 15th August 2022. 2 decades after the heinous crime, they became the heroes befitting of garlanding, welcome back in free society as what many claimed, sanskari men. Their release was approved by the Gujarat government based on recommendations of the Prison Advisory Committee. The panel at that time had 2 BJP MLAs as its members, in addition to other officials. Gujarat government officials had claimed then that the release was based very clearly on the state's 1992 remission policy. Now, today, the top court of the country struck down this early release order of the Gujarat government, putting Bilkis barbarians back in jail. The stunning verdict indicts the Gujarat government. It alleges abuse of power by the Gujarat government, that the Gujarat government was complicit with the 11 convicts. The Gujarat government not competent to pass the remission order. As the Bilkis Bano case makes headlines, viewers, as proverbial justice stands delivered a tad too late. Bilkis is silent. As reported by her lawyers, Bilkis and what is left of her family have fled their residence in fear of possible blowback of this verdict. The irony of today cannot be deeper. Justice finally at Bilkis's doorstep, but she wasn't there to receive it. Let this image burn a deep hole in our conscience, leave an indelible mark on how most of us looked the other way when her perpetrators were lauded, celebrated as sanskari family men.
Finally, has there been justice for Bilkis Bano? On 8th January, the Supreme Court struck down the 2022 remission granted by the Gujarat government to 11 convicts in the Bilkis Bano rape case. All 11 of them, now out of jail, have been directed to report to jail authorities within 2 weeks. And once again, Bilkis Bano is back in the headlines. Through its Bilkis Bano verdict on Monday, the top court of the country has set a landmark precedent on the issue of grant of remission to persons convicted of heinous crimes against women in India. A bench of Justices B.V. Nagaratna and Ujjal Bhuyan said the Gujarat government had no jurisdiction to entertain the application for remission of the convicts in the Bilkis Bano case or to pass orders granting them remission, as it was not the appropriate government to do so under the relevant provisions of the law. The bench said the appropriate government to decide on the remission is the state within whose territorial limits the accused are sentenced and not where the crime is committed or the accused are imprisoned. In this case, that would mean the Maharashtra government, not Gujarat. The bench also held that the Supreme Court order of May 13, 2022, which directed the Gujarat government to decide the remission as per the 1992 policies, was obtained by fraud and suppression of facts. So the order is nullity and all proceedings in pursuance of the said order stand vitiated under the law.
It's a very good judgment which has upheld the rule of law and the faith of the people of this country, particularly the women of this country, in rule of law, in the legal system, in the courts, and that there is an assurance of justice.
Why did the Gujarat government go to these lengths, throwing aside all the norms, breaking all the norms? They were so determined to give these people remission. Why? That is the question. What is the reason for it? Even though they probably knew they didn't have jurisdiction, they still did all that they did to see that these people were freed. Why? That is the question you should be asking, I should be asking, all the people in this country should be asking.
In its severe criticism and the taking down of the Gujarat government, the court wondered why the Gujarat government did not file any applications seeking a review of the 13th May 22 order, as it was not the appropriate authority. observing it as a classic case where the order of the Supreme Court has been used for violating the rule of law for passing orders for remission. The two-judge bench said the exercise of power by the state of Gujarat is an instance of usurpation and abuse of power, and the Gujarat government was complicit and acted in tandem with the 11 convicts.
जरूर हो तो देश की न्याय तंत्र और सर्वोच्च अदालत को हमको भरोसा है कि हमको जरूर न्याय मिलेगा.
Bilkis Bano and her family have led the life of a nomad since the 2002 incident. Even on the 8th of January, Monday, when the Supreme Court announced its stunning verdict delivering justice to Bilkis Bano, Bilkis and her family, in fear, left their current residence to ensure safety and privacy. While the Bilkis Bano case once again makes headlines, Bilkis Bano today silent and nowhere to be found. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, let's cut across right now to my colleague Nalini, who's going to break it down on what really went down in court. Nalini, this verdict in itself historic because somewhere down the line it overrules its own verdict earlier. Will you break it down for us on what were the biggest takeaways and also the indictment of the Gujarat government?
Well, Preeti, two main reasons why the Supreme Court today has said that these 11 men need to be sent back to jail. Number one, it says that the Gujarat government was not the appropriate government to decide as to whether or not these 11 convicts should be released in the first place. Why did they say that? They said that because when this case was going on, the trial in this entire matter was transferred out of Gujarat to Maharashtra to ensure that there is no undue influence on the case. In fact, the Supreme Court's gone ahead and said in its judgment that the reason why the trial was transferred out of Gujarat to Maharashtra was for this very reason, because they suspected that the Gujarat government might try to act in tandem with the convicts to ensure that the judgment only doesn't come in the first place. So that has come true even several decades later today, and the Supreme Court reiterated it all over again. Number two reason why the Supreme Court has asked for these 11 men to be sent back to jail is because they've said that the May 22 order that had specifically asked the Gujarat government to consider whether or not remission can be granted was illegal in itself, mainly because the convict would approach the Supreme Court, in which case the order was pronounced, had come with unclean hands, he had suppressed some material facts, he had also misled the court on several counts, including not disclosing to the courts that the CBI, the trial court judge, all had given a negative response on whether or not these men should in fact be released. So for these two main reasons, the Supreme Court has asked these men to be sent back to jail. But some very important criticism coming in for the Gujarat government in this case, because the Supreme Court's gone ahead and said that the Gujarat government acted in tandem and was complicit with the convicts in this case to play fraud upon the court. The Gujarat government should have challenged the May 22 order when they realized that it was illegal and not valid in law, but they did not do so. In fact, the Gujarat government went ahead and passed this order of release. Why this is a special and a significant verdict, Preeti, is because the Supreme Court has gone out of its way to reverse an order of individual liberty, and that is something that they've spoken of at length in the 251-page judgment. They've said that liberty is a fundamental right of every individual, but when the order that granted these 11 men liberty was illegal in itself, the liberty cannot be upheld, and which is why the liberty is being reversed, and all of these men now have 2 weeks to surrender and go back to jail once again before they can approach the Maharashtra government requesting for remission.
You know, Nalini, if you can quickly encapsulate, because you did so right at the end. So what are the legal options before these 11 convicts now? They will have to approach the Maharashtra court, then what?
Well, there are 2 main legal options available to them right now. Number one, they either file a review petition challenging this verdict, but that's a very, very bleak ground for them to try and get any relief, because review petitions are allowed on very slim grounds. They have to prove that there is some error apparent on the face of record in the Supreme Court judgment, or there is some new information that has come to light or new evidence that has come to light on the basis of which they deserve remission. The second option available to them is to go through the proper process, the due process, and approach the Maharashtra government, which is the competent government, to grant them remission. But even in that respect, the Supreme Court clearly said that remission is a right only available to somebody who's inside jail. So even if they have to approach the Maharashtra government, they first have to go back to jail, because while they are out on bail or released from jail, they cannot ask for remission at all.
Right. Nalini, thank you for joining us and giving us all the legal details of what went down and why this verdict was historic. I just want to now put the focus on a few good women, and we are saying that because they fought the good fight for Bilkis. You can call it the women's movement coming in together and supporting Bilkis through her most trying of times. Most of them didn't know her, didn't know where she came from, but came together to hold her hand through this legally, some financially. I want to cut across to them. I have with me Dr. Miran Chadda Borwankar, former police commissioner Pune. She's been one of the petitioners in this case. Some of these women have banded together and they petitioned the court after these men were given remission to question why were they given premature remission, and now it's come full circle with the court revoking that remission. I also have with me Professor Roop Rekha Verma. She's an activist in the Bilkis Bano case, as well as a petitioner in the same. Indira Jaisingh, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. She fought the case for petitioner Mahua Moitra. Suhasini Ali, Senior Leader, CPIM. She herself has been a petitioner in this case. I'd like to begin with Ms. Indira Jaisingh. Ma'am, first up, congratulations. And I have to say, for a lot of women who looked at what was going on with horror and disdain, today's been a stunning verdict. You fought it for petitioner Mahua Moitra. Do you believe it could have happened because a lot of people somewhere down the line were losing faith? Do you think that has been reinstilled today?
I did believe it would happen. You can tell the trend of how decisions are going during the course of arguments. But apart from that, one of the judges who delivered the judgment, don't forget, delivered the dissenting judgment in the demonetization case. So we knew that we are dealing with a judge who has the courage of her convictions and would stand up for it. I did not give up, ma'am. I never give up on any case, never, ever.
Courage of conviction, yes, Ms. Jaisingh, but it's a tad bit ironic because today this historic, stunning verdict has come out and Bilkis Bano is not at home because she was fearing a backlash. But that aside, such a strong judgment comes especially in the indictment of the Gujarat government. Can you take us through that?
Sure. Let me tell you that this is what I would describe as an extraordinary judgment. Why do I say it? Because the Supreme Court has overruled its own previous judgment, which happens very rarely. Okay. Now, why did they do it? That's the question. As I told you, it's not done. Why did they do it this time? Because they came to the conclusion that the petitioners, that is the convicts in this case, had committed a fraud in the court in the previous judgment. They had concealed the fact that they had already applied to the state of Maharashtra. They concealed the fact that the CBI gave an opinion against them. They concealed the fact that the trial court judge said, do not release them. All this was not mentioned in the petition they filed in the Supreme Court, on the basis of which they got a direction to the Gujarat government to decide the case. So, it's not often that the court recognizes the fraud that people play on the court. It's also very significant because the court has said the state of Gujarat actually knew that they did not have jurisdiction because they said so in their affidavit. And yet they didn't bother to file a petition for review. So they said the state was complicit. And last but not the least, a plea was made to send them back, and not to send them back to prison. And they said, why don't you exercise your extraordinary power to do justice? And it is here that you see the most interesting part of the judgment, where the Supreme Court says, look, justice is meant to uphold the rule of law, not to undermine it. And so we do have an articulation of what is justice. We also have an articulation of what is the rule of law. I think it is a history-making judgment, but certainly I'd like to say, are you aware that I was representing Mahua Moitra, not Bilkis, but it is the collective strength of the women's movement that has resulted. You asked about giving up. It is the women's movement that never gave up. And they persisted, they protected Bilkis almost with offense, not allowing anyone to access her, not even the media. And it is that, approach of the women's movement, realizing the importance of the issue, realizing that the gang rapes had taken place during a period of pogrom, communal violence, and that they were crimes against humanity. It is the women's movement that recognized that. And that is why I think this judgment has come as such a great, victory for the movement. It's a victory for the movement, not for you. And it's great for the whole of India.
No, Ms. Jaising, you couldn't be further from the truth, because there was a band of women who completely encircled Bilkis and who've taken this through. But there was, like you said, giving up. There was a sense of being let down by the criminal justice system as you saw the cracks and you saw what filtered through them. But away from that, you talk about how the court was very clear on the complicitness of the Gujarat government. It has to be one of the strongest takedown of a state government that has been seen by the Supreme Court. Now, can that be pursued legally, of the state government being complicit in what the Supreme Court said is pulling a fraud on the court?
I will tell you one thing. There is no doubt about the fact that the petitioners have committed contempt of court. And I would expect the affected parties to carry this forward, to approach the court of law and say that they have committed fraud. There can be no greater fraud. There can be no greater contempt than fraud of court. And so, do you remember that when they were released, their party members garlanded them and celebrated them? Do you recall that even in court, this argument was made? Oh, what's wrong with family members celebrating the release of their family members? Now, when you hear arguments, yes, at that time you are heartbroken. You don't give up hope, but you are heartbroken when you hear arguments like that. I mean, here's a woman, she could be anybody, she could be your wife, she could be your daughter. And how can you even talk like this? That's what has shocked me beyond belief.
Ms. Jaising, after the verdict, you shortly tweeted out how it's a win of the rule of law. But you and I both know this had implications which were legal, which were political, which were social. At the end of it now coming full circle, what is that message which is being delivered other than such a strong verdict?
At the end of the day, it's a very significant message, and I'll tell you why. In the first place, these gang rapes should never have happened. The communal violence should never have happened. They did happen. Yes, it did take a long time, and I regret it because, everybody says, oh, let the law take its own course, let the law take its own course. This is not how the law takes its own course. Courts, citizens, lawyers, everyone needs to be more vigilant if we want to see justice. But the most significant part of this judgment is that, decision makers, in other words, states, constitutional authorities, be it governments, any government, Gujarat, Maharashtra, doesn't matter who it is. But they cannot consciously undermine the Constitution of India. That's the message, okay? This is perhaps the only judgment which has sent this message to in all the governments across the country, that you cannot undermine the rule of law. Yes, a criminal might, an ordinary criminal might, but who are you? You are the state. You cannot undermine the rule of law, and this message has to go. Look, I can only hope that the message is learned loud and clear, but those who govern us, I don't think I can do anything beyond what I can do. I don't think the courts can do anything beyond what they've done. But the judgment is addressed to those who govern us, and it's telling them, please implement the Constitution of India, nothing more, nothing less.
It was a two-judge bench, Ms. Jaising, that scripted this verdict. Did you see both the judge concur? Were they on the same page?
Yes, they did. Justice Nagaratna and Justice Bhuyan both were on the same page. And, it's not right for a practicing lawyer to congratulate a judge. It's not even done, because it's just not done. But I think the kind of meeting of minds between them was quite amazing.
Ms. Jaising, final question. You talk of it being, and you're right, a big boost to the women's movement in India, that there was a safety circle of sort which, put Bilkis together, held her hand through this all. Would you elaborate who they were, who fought the good fight?
Very many people. It would not be right to name names. However, I know for a fact that while the program was going on, stalwarts from the women's movement, feminists, with a track record of a good reputation, academics, activists, they had all gone to Gujarat, okay? And, contemporaneously, they had produced reports in which they said gang rape is an act of war during genocide. And one thing I must tell you, international law, the covenant of the International Court of Justice says crimes against humanity cannot be granted remission. And there can be the total sentence is a minimum of 30 years. Now compare that with 14 years where these people have been out on parole that often. You tell me, I want to ask you this question. Are we living in a law-abiding country? We are not.
Ms. Jaising, final question. What are the legal options now that lie before these 11 convicts?
Well, you've asked an important question. Of course, I'm not an astrologer, but I know that it's open to them to file an application before the state of Maharashtra. What will happen, really, ma'am, is anybody's guess.
All right.
But the law has been declared by the Supreme Court. And one has to get into the whole issue of what was the nature of the crime. Look, I must tell you that in principle, I'm not a person who opposes remission, okay? I'm not a person who believes in punishment forever and ever and ever till death until kingdom come. I also believe that people are capable of reform, but when it comes to a crime of this nature, I don't believe that there is any space for reform. And that is evident by the fact that they celebrated when they came out. And by the way, that's a relevant factor in deciding whether to give remission. Do you have any regrets? Do you have any remorse? And they didn't. They didn't express remorse and repression. They celebrated.
I want to, just stay with me, ma'am, because you are right. There was no remorse, and they're open to approach the Maharashtra courts. But I want to also bring in another petitioner. Ms. Jaising, of course, fought the case for petitioner Mahua Moitra. We have now Miran Chadda Borwankar. She's a former IPS officer, and she was one of the petitioners in this case. And one of what Ms. Jaising said, the ring that the women movements put together to safeguard a very vulnerable Bilkis. Appreciate you joining us, Ms. Chadda, and congratulations, you were one of the petitioners. What made you, ma'am, stand up for Bilkis?
So there was an incident when I was the district police chief in Satara, where an old woman came from a very drought-prone area called Maswar. She banged on my office table and she said, I want justice and I will get justice. When Bilkis Bano's case, I would read in the newspapers that how she stood by her deposition in the court after having gone through an extremely brutal experience of having lost her 3-year-old child, having been gang raped, and the convicts being involved in 14 murders, including 6 of her own family. I thought this is a case where remission should not have been given. I was the prison chief of Maharashtra, state of Maharashtra, and I know when you can give remission and when it's not done. Therefore, I thought some of us, I must say that I'm grateful to Professor Jagdeep Chokhar, Madhu Bhandari ma'am, and Brinda Grover, our advocate, who took up our case pro bono, did not charge us a penny, and thought, yes, this is a grave injustice to Bilkis, to all women, I may say to the whole humanity, that we are giving remission to 11 convicts involved in a gang rape, involved in 14 murders, including of a 3-year-old child.
Ma'am, there's been severe indictment of the Gujarat government as well. The top court of the country has made scathing accusations where the Gujarat government's role in all of this is concerned.
See, I have not gone through the order as such. So I won't like to comment, but at many places I found over enthusiasm, which I feel is not done. We have to be logical, rational, and the punishment has to be, as Supreme Court has repeatedly said, proportionate to the kind of crime for which a convict is punished. And I thought this was disproportionate, and I very often felt there was unjustified enthusiasm.
I want to now go into the next petitioner. She's also been a big activist in the Bilkis Bano case. Ms. Rooprekha joins me. Rooprekha ji, सबसे बड़ा इसमें जो समाज के लिए मैसेज जा रहा है वो क्या है?
देखिए, मैसेज तो बहुत ही दुखदाई आ रहा है. देश के लिए बहुत शर्म की बात है इसमें जो संदेश इस फैसले से आ रहा है. गुजरात के बहुत से दूसरे भी मामले ऐसे पहले उठ चुके हैं जिसमें कि देश को शर्मिंदा होना पड़ा है, और अब तो गुजरात ही नहीं दूसरे भी तमाम इलाकों से हिंसक घटनाएं हो रही हैं और हमें बार-बार शर्मिंदा होने पड़ रहा है.
From Rooprekha ji, I want to move on to Subhashini Ali, who's also joining us. First up, congratulations, ma'am. Congratulations to all of you. You've all been petitioners in this case. And today, if we've had this verdict, it's come at the back of what you've also done to fight the good fight for Bilkis Bano. The question is, it is indeed historic, the verdict, especially because the Supreme Court has reversed its own verdict in a way to deliver this one. But the question I want to ask you, ma'am, which I asked Rooprekha ji, after all of this, after the big fight, which many of us, whether we like it or we don't like it, looked the other way, when the perpetrators of the crime were called sanskari men when they were garlanded, what is the larger message which is going out?
Well, I think that the message that goes out is a much more serious message. And that message is that why is the government of Gujarat, and also aided and abetted by the government of India, standing so firm and going to such lengths to protect, aid such absolutely terrible criminals who have committed a crime against humanity. They have gone to the extent of going beyond their jurisdiction in order to give remission to these people. And they have fought for them and for this remission in every way that they could. They have come to the Supreme Court, both the state government and the central government, with a battery of lawyers and with the entire state judicial machinery, simply to protect these people, to ensure that their remission goes unchallenged. And they have repeatedly tried to prolong the matter so that this kind of judgment does not come. Now, my question is why? Why have they done this? What is the reason for them to come out so hard and strong in defense of criminals who should just not find any supporter anywhere for the kind of crime that they've committed? The Constitution says, civilization norms say that governments should protect the weak, they should protect the victims, they should protect those who have been abused, those who have been subjected to violence and to incidents like rape. So why has the government not done it? They have done nothing to help Bilkis Bano. From the time that this horrible incident occurred, in which her baby daughter was killed in front of her, she was gang raped. From that time onwards, she has been fighting a battle against not only the perpetrators of the crime, but the government. They did nothing to help her for 8 years. The case had to be shifted to Maharashtra to get a judgment against them, a conviction. And after that conviction, they regularly gave parole to those criminals, and now they gave them remission. After giving them remission, when everybody was shocked by this remission, they went to, they went all out with the help of the central government to see that the remission was not challenged and to keep these people out of jail. My question is why? That is the big question in this case.
Ma'am, if you would just wait a while, I want to bring in Meera Chadda Borwankar once again into this conversation because, Ms. Borwankar, the fact is, you've been an IPS officer. You've dealt with so many of such cases. You've been a petitioner at the back of that. You did not know who Bilkis Bano was, but it touched a chord where you wanted to be a petitioner and follow it legally. Because, there's one thing to feel it, there's one thing to follow it through. All of you have been able to do that. What is the positive of it all? Because at one end, it raises very strong questions where India's judicial or criminal justice system comes into being. But on the other hand, it also gives out a very positive message, but yet raises questions where the society comes into question.
So both. There is indeed a positive message. In fact, I had discussion about a week back when we came to know the case will come up for final order, where a very straightforward bureaucrat told me that you are fighting a losing battle. So this kind of negative emotions and negative propaganda can be set aside by such positive orders, judgments. But yeah, we have to not to be satisfied with one single order. We have to see the whole system, and also many times one feels it's not in repair or patchwork which will help. Ultimately, we may even have to go in for the overall of the whole criminal justice system.
The irony, ma'am, today is because justice is delivered at the back of a lot of what you women have done. To quote it in a very strange fashion, delivered where Bilkis Bano is concerned, but she's not there. We have been trying to reach her, not there, and understandably, because there has been a section of the media that has been hounding her as well. And she does face a backlash with what could be expected with this verdict. Do you think there needs to be now a rethink? Because so many of us looked the other way when all of this was happening, garlanding, making them feel like heroes, calling them sanskari. Many of us even went to that extent.
I definitely feel that let's not give up. There are many ills in our criminal justice system, but giving up will not take us anywhere. Instead, let's hold hands together, men and women, all of us, let's hold our hands together and work for a just, fair, transparent criminal justice system.
Ma'am, a lot will happen politically. You are one of, I want to go back to Ms. Subhashini Ali again. A lot of it will happen politically. You're connected with politics, but away from that, because there has been culpability of the Gujarat government in this as per the Supreme Court, do you think you would pursue it legally?
You see, it needs to be legally pursued. Certainly, I don't know whether that will be feasible or possible. What I'm saying is it not necessary for the citizens of this country to question these governments as to why they are behaving in the way in which they're behaving? That is what is important.
All right, रूपरेखा जी, अगर मैं आपके पास आखिरी एक सवाल करूं, इसमें एक बड़ा अगर आपको मैसेज दिखता है, वो क्या है समाज के लिए?
लेकिन मैं सिर्फ इतना ये कहूंगी कि कम से कम आज जो वर्डिक्ट आया है, उसने देश के ऊपर लगे तमाम कलंक को कम से कम अंशतः पार्शियली तो धोया है. हमें मायूसी हो रही थी अदालतों से भी, उस मायूसी को कुछ दूर करके हमारा विश्वास फिर से अदालत में और न्याय में इस फैसले ने हमें मजबूत किया है.
मैम, इसी पे शो खत्म करते हैं. I really want to congratulate all of you, and I really want to say thank you from a lot of women who are very frustrated, very demoralized as they looked at being let down by the criminal justice system in this country with what we saw. And thank you, like I said, and I can't say it over and over and over again. Thank you for fighting the good fight, because a lot of us as women felt it deep in our hearts. Very few followed it through. You four women have been that small clutch of women who've taken that through, that circle of women that we were talking about, that kept things together, kept it moving, and delivered justice to Bilkis Bano. Let's hope this is the end of it, but it's not going to be, sadly, because these 11 men will approach the Maharashtra court now. But this verdict is historic. It's reversed. The Supreme Court today reversed its own earlier verdict. So Keep that in consideration. And for all our viewers who looked the other way, hopefully you will rethink today. A quick break. Stay with us. On the other side, Rahul Kamal.